Okay, here we go. Page 124. Still a young man, only about 24 years old. He was terribly unsociable and taciturn. Not that he was shy or ashamed of anything. No, on the contrary, he had an arrogant nature and seemed to despise everyone. But precisely at this point, we cannot avoid saying at least a few words about him. That is, we're talking about Smerdyakov. He had been raised by Marfa, right, and Grigory, but the boy grew up without any gratitude, as Grigory put it, solitary and with a sidelong look in his eye. He was fond of hanging cats and burying them in the with ceremony. And Grigory sort of cruelly, but describes him as not even a human being. He was begotten of the bathhouse slime. Not a polite thing to say to children. You shouldn't speak to children that way. Anyway, Smerdyakov is seen as this person who may or may not be a son of Fyodor, right? But what's interesting is that he doesn't have any gratitude. He doesn't have gratitude for anything, and I think that's going to be an important point to understand, like Smerdyakov's life and his actions and things. Okay, so let's just sort of jump into the thick of it, because there's no real easy way to introduce what's happening in this book. This book, called The Sensualist, is probably one of the more confusing books of the whole novel, because you get the whole drama, as we've already talked about a little bit. The drama comes on the scene, and you try to put all the pieces together and how everyone's related to everyone, and you get the backstory of what's going to lead into the action of the book. So it's hard to keep all of that straight, because it's really, really complicated stuff. Okay, so can someone say something about how Dmitri and Katerina eventually come to be engaged? What's the context of their engagement?
So she's the daughter of a colonel.
Uh-huh.
And this colonel was not managing money correctly and was lending to people who were not repaying it back.
Yeah, so the daughter was the daughter's father, Katerina's father was a military guy, took money, used it basically to try to make more money, kind of like gambling. It's basically what it is. And it all works out when it works out, but when it doesn't work out, you lose your money. And so that's the situation he found himself in. Uh-huh.
And so then, who was it? Alexei or Dmitri, one of the two, like, tells the other one to go tell Katerina, like, if you come to me and ask me in person for the money, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
And then Katerina comes to, I forget which one it was, I think it's Dmitri. Dmitri, and he kind of gets, like, disgusted with himself and what he was going to do.
Yeah.
So he's, like, has this, like, dilemma, and he eventually, like, just writes the check.
Yeah.
And then Katerina comes back to him later and is like, I want to be engaged to you after her father dies.
Yeah.
And she moves in like Vermont or something.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Dmitri is a self-proclaimed sensualist, a self-proclaimed insect. Right? He knows himself really well. Dmitri understands his own heart. And he knows that he had these intentions. Katerina has a lot of beauty. Doesn't have any money, but she's got a lot of beauty. At least at this time, she doesn't have money. Later on, she inherits some, but now she's poor, right? Because her dad squandered it all, and he's in this debt. And Dmitri got all this money from his dad. If you remember, this is sort of interesting. It's easy to miss a lot of this stuff. So Dmitri got these, I think it was 3,000 rubles from Fyodor, and Fyodor basically said, "This is it. you're paid in full. End of the story. You're cut off. And what happens is Dmitri finds out about that situation with Katerina. Katerina comes, and the sensualist insect heart of Dmitri is growing, and he's feeling like, wait a second. I have this money. She needs the money. She has the beauty. I need the beauty. And he's like, it's like a match made in heaven. And then he's kind of like feeling himself pulled in this direction, and he then feels disgusted with himself, and he just gives the money to Katerina without any like expectation of anything in return. She makes a bow, but not just any old bow, the good old-fashioned Russian bow, right? Like the real bow, and leaves. And this is a fascinating scene because of the fact that it shows that the Karamazov is capable of, on one day, being at extreme lows, extreme depths, right? And then it's the next moment capable of going from there to extreme heights of like meaning, of significance, of worth, of goodness. I don't know however you want to put it. And so Dmitri kind of sees the sensualist and describes himself, who is like the paradigm sensualist. Well, maybe Fyodor is. It's sort of two peas in a pod there. But the idea is that they are they're kind of torn between this movement from going to the heights and going to the depths. When they do go to the depths, they don't just do a little vileness. They go, as Dmitri puts it, heels up. They jump into the pit, heels up, right? Meaning like they go head first. There's no reservation. But when they make the turn, there's no reservation either. Completely willing to let go of his 3,000 rubles, like everything he was hoping to get from his dad. He basically completely squanders his father's inheritance without any like sort of second thought. And it's as if he's not even intending this. Oh, and she'll want to be married to me if I do this. He doesn't really even have those thoughts at the time, right? And so that is a scene where you see the mix of these two things so clearly, and it's really amazing the way he puts it on page. Hold on, you'll have to stay in suspense. On page 108. 108. Let me read some of this to you. I want to tell you now about the insects, about those to whom God gave sensuality. So he's quoting this poem, I believe it's by Schiller, and he says, to all these different things, God gave this and this and this. To insects, he gave sensuality. And then he basically says, that's us. That's us Karamazovs. I am that very insect, brother, and those words are precisely about me. And all of us Karamazovs are like that. And then here's something interesting to know. And in you, an angel, the same insect lives and stirs up storms in your blood. Storms because sensuality is a storm more than a storm. Beauty is a fearful and terrible thing. Fearful because it is undefinable and it cannot be defined, because here God gave us only riddles. Here the shores converge. Here all contradictions live together. Is Dmitri, what side is Dmitri on? Is he for here or for here? And it's sort of like he's for both. This is like the torment of the Karamazov, of the sensualist. Right, and we'll fill this in here in a bit. I'll keep reading. Okay, skip to the end of that. No, maybe not to the end, just a couple lines down. Besides, I can't bear it that some man, even with a lofty heart and the highest mind, should start with the ideal of the Madonna and end with the ideal of Sodom. It's even more fearful when someone who already has the ideal of Sodom in his soul does not deny the ideal of the Madonna either, and his heart burns with it. Verily, verily burns, as in his young blameless years. No, man is broad, even too broad. I would narrow him down. Sort of, man is broad, too broad. I would narrow him down. What do you think? What do you think he means by that? Anyone want to take a stab at, like, he's describing this? Man's broad, too broad. Any stabs at what that means?
Is he just saying he'd rather not have all of this?
Yeah. It's like narrow him down. Like don't let him aspire to so much. Don't let. I mean, like, just like reel him in a bit. Like just let his domain be a little bit, smaller, and he'd be a lot easier to understand. It'd be a lot easier to live. It'd be a lot less torment. Right? It would be better to have man narrowed if he wasn't constantly striving for something so high and at the same time something so low. Right? At one point in the novel, probably like 300 pages or so, there's going to be a description of like the brutes. We call men who do horrible, disgusting things. We call them like brutes, or we call them like doing like brutish actions of like the unrational animals. And what you find in this book is that's unfair to the brutes, because the brutes don't act as badly as humans do, right? There's something like only man has this ability to go to depths of depravity that not even beasts go down to. And it's largely because, and when you kind of think about it often, maybe you don't think about it often, but sometimes you think about it, that sometimes this is what the remember we read that book called Augustine's Confessions? Oh no, wait, we didn't read that in this class, but I keep talking about that. Augustine talks about stealing the pear. If you've ever read the Confessions, even if you haven't, this is a very famous example. And he steals this pear when he's a kid, and he throws the pear. He takes the pears and he throws them. And he's like, why do I do this? And it seems to be what draws him to this. This is Augustine, probably one of the first sensualists. Well, maybe Adam was the first sensualist, I don't know. But, and he throws the pear, and he's saying, why did I do this? And it's kind of like the fact that he just wanted to do something that was like forbidden, something that was wrong. Like, there's something about this feeling of being able to be powerful and exert yourself. And there's this sense of like freedom or excitement in doing the thing that's wrong. Like if you've ever had that excitement about TPing, the fun about TPing isn't the actual throwing of toilet paper. You can do that in your room all you want to, right? You can TP your own house, but it's something like that you shouldn't be doing it to these people. These are innocent people. They don't know you're doing this. That's the thing that you like. It's the destruction of it. Does that kind of make sense? And now I think all humans, well, if you're a centralist, there's something about the depravity, the vileness of certain actions that draw us to it. And it's like, only if we could kind of be like, raise the floor and lower the ceiling a little bit, life would be a lot more tolerable. It'd be a lot easier to bear. Your aspirations wouldn't be so extreme. Humans have really extreme aspirations, which cause a lot of anguish for us.
Can you put all the Karamazovs like in this chart, I guess?
I think Fyodor is in here,
Yeah.
and I think Dimitri's in here. Ivan, I think we saw last class. He's in here too, although it's a slightly different form. It's sort of like Ivan is someone who is tormented by these extremes of like atheism, the sense of like there's like enough. It's either nothing means anything, or everything means like divinity. Everything means God. So So I think Ivan is torn in the sense of this extreme, these extreme options. And this is the thing that Zosima points out, that, thank God who gave you such a lofty heart to be tormented by this, I think is the way he put it, that you can be tormented by the options of the extremity of the heights of man, or the depths of man, the lowliness that we can find ourselves. And then you might think, but Alyosha, he surely doesn't fit on here. And then, so I was reading from 108, and then look on page 109. Right, so this is what's interesting. This is top of page 109. If you were the same as me, you'd know what that means. Right, I mean, he's talking about some of his partying, all of his sensual endeavors. He goes on to say, I loved depravity. I also loved the shame of depravity. This is a really interesting thing to reflect on. You might not understand what that means, and that might be because you don't fully grasp the real depth of our own failings, our own sin, our own wrongdoing. So kind of think about the real things that you do that are down here. I don't know those. No one else probably does, but you probably do. And there's this sense of this torment, right? I love the depravity, but I also love the shame of depravity. I loved cruelty. I'm not a bedbug and evil insect. In short, am I not a bedbug and evil insect? In short, a Karamazov. And he goes on, he talks about how he met this girl. They were on a carriage ride, and he sort of became very sensual and offended her greatly, right? And he said he kind of loved the fact that he was like that, but he also hates the fact that he was like that. And then what happens is very fascinating. Alyosha blushes, and the impression would be, Alyosha's too innocent and naive, and those stories of all this sort of stuff about, as Dmitri puts it, squeezing this girl's hand in the dark, is a little too embarrassing for Alyosha. And then here's an interesting, very insightful thing that I think needs to be kept in mind. Bottom of page 109. You say that because I blushed, Alyosha suddenly remarked. I blushed not at your words and not at your deeds, but because I am the same as you. You? Well, that's going a bit too far, right, says Dmitri. No, not too far, Alyosha said hotly. Apparently the thought had been with him for some time. The steps are all the same. I'm on the lowest and you are above, somewhere on the 13th. That's how I see it. But it's all one and the same, all exactly the same sort of thing. Whoever steps on the lowest step will surely step on the highest. So one had better not step at all, not if one can help it. Can you? This is what Dmitri says. And then Alyosha says, it seems not. And goes on. So I think at the very least, Alyosha himself places himself in this dynamic. That he too is a Karamazov. He too has taken this low step. And I think you probably read this and you didn't even know what you were reading. But in light of this, because this is the sixth time I've read this book, I get a little obsessive about trying to draw out things. But remember at the very beginning of this book called The Sensualists, right? The whole book is called The Sensualists. Here's what Alyosha is doing. He's going to his father's house, and he's walking, and he's thinking, and what makes him come to the realization that Dmitri is there? What makes him initially see Dmitri? The first, because he's walking, he doesn't see Dmitri. Dimitri's and no one, he's heads down, Alyosha's heads down. Dimitri's trying to get a hold of him, but he doesn't want to scream because he's trying to be secretive. What makes Alyosha look up and look around?
I think he's in the backyard, the neighboring to his.
dad's house.
And he remembers Rakitin say that there is this woman there that had these really nice dresses, long trains, and so then he raises his head and he kind of looks at the house, and then he sees Dmitri. And then the way that's written is there is a little, I believe there's a little ellipses, but the whole point is Alyosha, very innocent, low level. But I think the thing that you'll slowly start to see about Alyosha is he's on the same path as Dmitri. He's on the same path as Ivan. He's on the same path as all these people. And it's kind of like, it starts so innocent, but it just takes one little like step from the path to like it just sort of reduplicates itself, and it just sort of carries. And so I think Alyosha recognizes that he himself is like that. Fyodor also, interestingly, and in the chapter over the cognac, or different translations, over the brandy, Fyodor describes Zosima as a sensualist because he puts honey in his tea and takes little cakes and with raspberries on them from, the women that come. He's a sensualist, that Zosima. Right? And you might think, oh no, Zosima's not a sensualist. Wait until you get to the middle books, when you get a little bit about the life of Zosima. You'll realize that he's not too far from a sensualist himself. So I think the idea is this is kind of going back to the theme we were looking at about the Karamazov as sort of this depiction of like this fallen or unjust person. But there's this great power, potential, if you will, for something super extreme. It's almost as if man cannot rest in the middle, lukewarm, if you will. Either going to be super hot or super cold. It's the insect, the sensual. Here's what the sensualist has going for it. He's not lukewarm. If he's gonna go in, he's gonna go in heels up. It's better to be hot or cold. Right? It's an interesting thing. It's better to be hot than cold or lukewarm. It's better to be hot or cold. Right? There's a and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the Karamazov is someone who can fully give himself, almost to the point of losing himself, complete destruction, for something so extreme. It's a very interesting phenomenon that you recognize in people's lives. There are people, very holy people, radical lives of these people. Like classic examples are like desert fathers and things like that, who are only capable of this radical life because of some sort of radical depth that they've done. I mean, a lot of the desert fathers were like murderers, harlots, prostitutes, people that lived really despicable lives. And it's because of that lets them like have this openness, and not just this openness, but this sense of it's like they've tested this out, and that's what then kind of makes this a type of a possibility. It makes it a possibility. So I think this is one of the things that Dmitri recognizes about himself. Okay, I've been kind of rambling. Any questions, comments, either about stuff that they talk about in this book? There's a ton that happens, so unfortunately we won't be able to talk about everything. But anything from the reading for today, plot line, how characters are related, anything like that. There's a ton here, so. Yes?
Well, it's a question, but it deals with the incident with Dmitri and Katrina, and he said it's towards the end of the 4th chapter of 3. But I've never looked at any woman with such hatred. I swear by all that's holy. I looked at her then for 2 or 3 seconds. Terrible hatred. A hatred that's only a hairbreadth away from love. Like, his description, so was it that because he saw that she was so virtuous that, I don't know, like, it was confusing to me how this hatred and love could be a hairbreadth away in this,
So this is.
it's,
Oh.
giving the money in that
Yeah, yeah.
situation when he gives the money to Katrina.
Right.
Without
So
taking advantage of her.
yes. I want to read this passage, but I want to see where I think okay, I think this is it. Okay, so I will. If you want the whole truth, is that kind of right around where somebody talking about? Do you want the whole truth? That is, I won't spare myself. My first thought was a Karamazov thought. Did you get that? Is that like in that paragraph?
The paragraph, of course, you can see I'd lost everything. She had run away with that sweet moment. That paragraph. I have a different translation. Third paragraph at the end of
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. So here, the way it plays out a little bit earlier, I think might also kind of shed light on this. But so this is what this translation has for that. Believe me, never in such a moment have I looked at any woman, not a single one, with hatred. See, I'm making the sign of the cross. But as I say, like, look, I'm telling the truth. But I looked at this one for 3 or 5 seconds, then with terrible hatred, the kind of hatred that is only a hair's breadth from love, the maddest love. I went to the window, leaned my forehead on the frozen glass, and I remembered that the ice burned my forehead like fire. It didn't keep her long. Don't worry. I turned around, went to the table, yada yada. And I think part of it is because, like, what she does to him is. I think it has to do with the fact of, like, to really feel the force of both these two things. It's kind of like public confession time, okay? Not for me, not for you. Like, when I'm wasting time, I'm telling my kids to do their school, practice their violin or whatever, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, watching YouTube videos on like how to cut dovetails and like maple and like different like woodworking type of like stupid stuff that I don't need to be looking up and then all of a sudden like my kids come up and I kind of, it's as if in that instance I kind of recognize in light of their presence like the lowliness. I kind of didn't want to admit to myself my inconsistencies, the fact that I'm wasting my time, but by being known by them and myself seeing myself as known by them, I kind of feel sometimes I feel, so to speak, judged by them, but it's like I judge myself and I recognize the real vileness, weakness, inconsistency. There's more. It's like if I tell my kids, don't yell at your siblings, and then all of a sudden I'm yelling at my kids, and then I see my kids like recognizing. Like I kind of despise them in a way, just for the fact that they've made me feel this about myself. And I think there's something like that happening here, where it's not so much that something she does, but it's something that happens in Dmitri, in that he finds himself like wavering between these two extremes, like the Karamazov thought, which is like, here's a perfect opportunity to use my 3,000 rubles for vile means, and it's sort of getting all the more exciting, all the more innocent she looked. But then at the same time, that is like coupled with this recognition of its own like depravity, and so I think he's sort of hating her, but it's really a form of like his recognition of his own. Well, the way it's put by Dmitri is that I think he sees the ideal of Sodom in his soul, and at the same time the ideal of the Madonna, and he like both these are like juxtaposed to each other in the one and the same instant. So I think that's kind of the drama that's taking place in him. I think does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and then that kind of goes into like later on him not wanting to go back because he used to realize that I wasted the 3,000 that she gave me to actually do what I was supposed to, and I didn't
Yeah.
do it, and I'm just a slowly person.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think it's like when you kind of feel guilt or guilty, it's almost like the only person that can really judge you is yourself in a way, because no one can make you feel guilty unless you kind of make yourself open to them in a sense. Like here's what I'm thinking. Like contrition comes from my own awareness of the situation that I'm in. Like no one can make me feel contrite. No one can make me think or feel like I've done something wrong. Even if I have done something wrong, they give me all these arguments for it, and I can just, it doesn't like really penetrate. But I think what guilt is this recognition, we have it here, of the, 2 minutes? You have these two ideals, the Madonna and of Sodom, and I think what guilt is, it's like you've gone to the depths of Sodom, but you haven't renounced the ideal of the Madonna or the good or God or however you wanted to put it. Because otherwise there wouldn't be guilt. Like guilt is something like you've gone to the depths, but you brought the heights down, and so you can feel guilty for having gone to the depths. It's like it's this strange thing. It's like the person who really feels this guilt or this anguish or this torment is someone who is using this to prove the fact that they still hold on to that. That's sort of what guilt is. Guilt is this because otherwise guilt doesn't make sense, right? No one can feel guilty if they haven't done something fairly contradictory. Namely, they've done an evil, but they haven't renounced the idea of the good. If they've done evil, but they don't like see it as evil, they won't feel guilty, right? If they hold so much to the good that they don't do the evil, they won't feel guilty. It's sort of like they have to have it both ways in order to feel guilty. You kind of like got to go down here, but still be like lingering up here. And only in that context is like guilt really something that comes on the scene. And I think that's manifested in Dmitri, and I think that's a really painful process, and I think that's why he sort of again describes himself as like wanting to kill himself in a way.
How would you contrast guilt with the idea of shame? Because I feel like shame is sort of, you might not really feel any remorse for what you've done, or you don't really have a moral sort of standing, but it's more of like what society thinks and sort of a self-preservation type thing. And I feel like a lot of times people say, I feel guilty, but it's not really because they're thinking of the morality of it, they're sort of thinking like how they're perceived.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. That shame is more concerned or focused on like what other people think about the state of your soul, the state of yourself, who you are, what you are. And so whereas guilt is more of like, I think, an internal reality. So I think there are people that can feel guilty without feeling like although, I mean, this obviously it might be a semantic thing because different people can use shame in a different way, and here's what I mean by shame. But I think one way of maybe thinking about shame is it has to do with the way other people perceive you, and it's kind of this focus on maybe the externals in a way, whereas I think guilt has to do with the focus on like the internal state. It's like I feel ashamed when my kids watch me wasting my time looking up like YouTube woodworking videos. I don't feel like, I mean, sometimes I feel guilty, but it's more about like the external situation of it, and I think, and it might even be that like what shame can do is it doesn't condemn the actual action, but it condemns the context in which the action is done, namely like a public action. So as long as it's not done publicly, there's not going to be any shame associated, because I don't need to feel shame for it, and because no one knows about it, and so then it like drives it in a way. And so it's like this is not a shameful thing because no one knows about it. And if one's focus is solely on shame and not like guilt, then it's as if like if it's hidden, then there's nothing to feel guilty about. But the question is whether that's actually true or not. I think this is one of the great graces, the great blessings that the sensualist is given. They're able to feel guilty, tormented. They can feel tormented. And we saw that in Ivan, and you see this in Dimitri. And so, I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, it really wasn't so much a question; it was more of an interesting insight that you brought up. So I think it has something to do with that. Any other questions? Yeah, we are like. Did we talk about Grushenka?
Yeah, she's interesting.
Yeah. What do you think about Grushenka? Say something about Grushenka. What do you think about her?
I don't know. Like, I feel like she just plays everybody.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
I know there's something real to her, but she really just, like, she takes delight in messing with people's minds.
Yeah. This is why she loves Fyodor. She's like a female version of a buffoon, I think. I think there's something like she. So important to note, she is not. Although she's described this way, this is not true. She's not like a prostitute or anything. Although she does act sort of very loosely, and she loves leading people on. But it's more just for the sake of tormenting them, I think is part of the idea. Because she is actually, I think it was referenced here. If it wasn't referenced here, I'm sorry that this is a spoiler, but I think it was referenced in here, that she's actually kind of engaged to someone that's like not really around, but anyway, the whole point of it is she likes the idea of sort of causing anguish in people. She loves that. It's like I love leading people on and getting them to really desire me and want me, and kind of feeling them suffer because of me, their passion for me, and now it ultimately culminates in nothing, which is the whole like enjoyment of the whole situation. But I think this is not terribly far from like Fyodor's buffoonery, right? It's a way of causing pain. Yeah. Okay. One last little point, and then we can go. We can talk about more stuff from this book if you want. But the idea of this is when Smerdyakov is talking with Fyodor about the one who lies about, like, basically denies Christ, denies the faith, and And Smerdyakov says, actually, there'd be a way out, because if you deny the faith, then you're not actually a Christian, and then there's like no punishment for like renouncing Christianity because you're not a Christian in the first place. And so then all that would have to happen is then like once you like save your head, then you sort of repent and you know, come and accept Christ or whatever, and you know, find yourself back in. And I think in one sense, the problem, Smerdykov's problem isn't so much in the saying that like the renunciation part, but it's like this whole pre-planned thing that like to renounce, because it's almost like what sin is, it's the renunciation of the faith in one way. But it's not a renunciation that's like pre-planned. Like, oh, it's okay to do this, because then you'll just, all you have to do is just feel sorry for having done this, and you'll be brought back. It's kind of like, you can't pre-plan contrition. You can't say like, okay, I'll do this, and then I'll feel contrite for it, or I'll feel sorry for it. Right? So it's kind of like you can't, the problem is that the whole thing becomes this systematic program of like, okay, there's nothing really wrong, because if you do this, then you can just apologize for it. But you can't just say like, you can't conjure up acts of contrition or acts of like forgiveness. Does that kind of make sense? Anyway, Smerdyakov is a guy with a lot of ideas that kind of are going to get him in trouble. All right, we will see you Wednesday.